The Viridian delegates smirked as Ambassador Ilara Kovinth entered the Grand Council chambers. Their translucent skin pulsed with bioluminescent contempt as they towered over her, 3 meters tall and draped in liquid metals that shifted with their thoughts. "The human representative arrives," announced High Counselor Davrex, his voice broadcast telepathically throughout the chamber, where 67 galactic species gathered. How quaint that they still send flesh ambassadors instead of quantum proxies. Ilara maintained her composure, despite being the only human in a room of entities who had mastered faster-than-light travel while Earth was still burning coal. Her neural implants were primitive by Council standards, barely adequate to translate the 17 simultaneous conversations happening around her. "The Terran Collective comes before the Galactic Council to petition for defensive intervention against the Morgrath incursion into our solar system," she stated, her voice steady despite the stakes. Earth's orbital settlements were already under siege, Mars' colony gone dark 2 weeks ago. A ripple of what could only be described as laughter circulated through the chamber. The Azari representative, an amorphous cloud of intelligent particles, condensed briefly into a face-like pattern to speak. "Humanity asks for protection from the Morgrath. The same humans who rejected Council oversight of their primitive nuclear arsenals, who refused neural standardization, who still cling to individual consciousness as if it were sacred?" The Viridian High Counselor gestured, bringing up a holographic display of Earth's modest defense fleet. 37 ships, the most advanced barely capable of intersystem travel. "The Morgrath Imperium fields 10,000 world breakers," Davrex said. "Their least vessel could atomize your homeworld. What exactly do you expect us to do, human? Sacrifice our civilizations for yours?" Ilara reached into her diplomatic pouch and withdrew a small, unremarkable stone cube with faint runes etched on its surface. The chamber's sophisticated sensors immediately focused on it, and several delegates shifted uncomfortably. "This is a fragment recovered from beneath the Antarctic ice sheet," she said. "Our archaeologists believe it's approximately 8 billion years old, predating this galaxy's current formation." The chamber fell silent. "We have 13 more," Ilara continued, setting the cube on the central platform. "Each contains what we've managed to identify as a partial consciousness signature, ancient, powerful, and bearing striking similarities to the neural patterns your historians attribute to the ancestral gods." The Viridian High Counselor's skin flushed pale. "Impossible. The gods vanished from this universe eons before your species evolved opposable thumbs." Ilara nodded. "And yet, we found their remnants buried on our primitive world. We're not asking for charity, Counselor. We're offering a trade. Help us against the Morgrath, and we'll provide full access to all 13 artifacts." "Or?" asked the Azari representative, particles swirling anxiously. Ilara's neural implant flashed a confirmation, signal from Earth Command. She smiled, not the diplomatic smile she'd been trained to maintain, but something older, something predatory. "Or in 48 hours, we begin dismantling the artifacts to reverse engineer their technology ourselves. Our scientists believe the consciousness fragments can be manipulated, perhaps even interrogated." Around the chamber, the delegates' various biological and mechanical translation systems struggled to interpret the word that followed, but the intent was unmistakable. Sacrilege. The council chambers erupted into chaos. Species that had barely acknowledged humanity's existence for centuries were suddenly gesturing, signing, pulsing, and screaming in a cacophony of outrage and fear. Commander Ryvan Zaris watched the feed from the orbiting Terran defense vessel, unrelenting. His scarred hands tightened around the command console as he observed Ilara standing calmly at the center of the storm she'd unleashed. "She did it," murmured Lieutenant Vashti Kal, her cybernetically enhanced eyes scanning the incoming data streams. "They're terrified." Ryvan nodded grimly. "Good. Fear is the only language the Council understands. For 3 decades, they've watched border worlds fall to the Morgrath and done nothing. The view screen shifted to an external view of the Morgrath. Blockade around Jupiter's moons, massive obsidian ships shaped like twisted vertebrae, each capable of sterilizing a continental landmass. Earth had already lost 4 defense vessels attempting to break through to the Europa colony. Command confirms the artifact's consciousness fragment is already responding to stimuli, Vashti said, reading from her neural feed. Dr. Isolde has established rudimentary communication protocols. On screen, the council chamber had settled enough for High Counselor Davrex to speak again, his translucent skin now ashen gray. "You cannot possibly comprehend what you're threatening," he warned Ilara. The ancestral gods were not benevolent entities. They shaped galaxies through will alone. They consumed stars for sustenance. If you awaken even a fragment— "We comprehend perfectly," Ilara interrupted. "Humanity has stared extinction in the face before, Counselor. We've survived ice ages with stone tools. We've endured plagues that decimated our populations. We rebuilt after our own atomic weapons scarred our world. And now we face the Morgrath alone because this council is too paralyzed by politics to enforce its own protection mandates." She placed her hand on the artifact, a gesture that made several delegates physically recoil. "You dismiss us as primitive because we still value individual consciousness, because we haven't surrendered ourselves to your gestalt networks. But you've forgotten something essential in your evolutionary rush toward efficiency. You've forgotten desperation. You've forgotten what creatures will do when backed into a corner." Riven watched with grim satisfaction as the Azari representative's particle cloud condensed into a tight, anxious sphere, the equivalent of a defensive posture. "The human speaks truth," said a new voice. The Tuathi observer, a species so ancient, they rarely participated in council proceedings. The elongated, crystalline being floated forward. "The ancestral gods chose worlds with care. If artifacts reside on Earth, it was by design, not chance." Davrex turned to the Tuathi. "You cannot possibly suggest—" "I suggest nothing," the crystalline being interrupted. "I merely observe that the humans have survived 17 extinction-level events in their planetary history. Perhaps the gods saw something in them that we have been blind to." In the command center of the Unrelenting, Riven pulled up the deployment status of Earth's remaining defense fleet. 29 vessels scattered throughout the solar system, maintaining a fragile perimeter against a force that outnumbered them 300 to 1. "Dr. Isolde is reporting increased activity from all 13 artifacts," Vashti reported. "She says they're resonating with each other, communicating." Riven looked at the screen where Ilara stood unflinching before the most powerful beings in the galaxy. "Then let's hope our ambassador is equally persuasive. We have exactly 41 hours before we need to implement Protocol Prometheus." On screen, Ilara's voice cut through the council chamber once more. "We did not come to threaten. We came seeking alliance, but make no mistake, humanity will not go quietly into extinction. If we must burn, we will ensure our fire illuminates the galaxy. And if we must speak to gods to survive, we've brought the iron tools to make them answer." The Galactic Council took precisely 37 hours to reach their decision. Remarkable speed for a body that had once debated the definition of sentience for 3 decades. Fleet Admiral Talura Morwen studied their response as her flagship, the Adamant Will, maintained position at the edge of Mars' gravity well. "They're sending 70 vessels," she told the assembled officers in the war room. "Not their most advanced, but enough to potentially turn the tide against the Morgrath advance." Colonel Esden Corvo, head of Special Operations, leaned forward, his augmented eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "And the conditions? All artifacts to be surrendered upon successful repulsion of the Morgrath forces," Talura replied, her weathered face betraying nothing. "And permanent council oversight of all Terran archaeological sites." The room filled with murmurs, some relieved, others indignant. "They still don't understand," said Dr. Nix Isolde, joining them via quantum projection from her laboratory beneath Olympus Mons. Her form flickered slightly, the quantum entanglement strained by the Morgrath's dimensional, dampening fields. The artifacts aren't just relics. They're choosing to wake up now, after 8 billion years of dormancy. Talura fixed her gaze on the scientist's projection. Explain. Nix's projection gestured, filling the room with translucent data models, complex patterns of energy that spiraled and interconnected between representations of the 13 artifacts. The fragments contain neural patterns unlike anything we've encountered before. Not just advanced, fundamentally different. They perceive time as a spatial dimension, and they're responding to humanity specifically. Esden frowned. You're saying these gods are talking to us? Why now? I believe they've always been watching, Nix replied. The artifacts were placed strategically around our planet at key tectonic junctures. They've been monitoring our evolutionary development, our struggles, our triumphs. And something about this moment, humanity facing extinction, has triggered their awakening. A tremor shook the ship, distant but powerful enough to ripple through. The quantum projection. The Morgrath were testing Mars's defensive grid again. The Council fleet won't arrive for another 16 hours, Talura said grimly. Europa won't last that long. We need to deploy now with what we have. Esden's expression darkened. With 29 ships against 10,000? That's not a battle, Admiral. That's a funeral procession. Perhaps not, Nix interjected. Her projection manipulated the data models, focusing on one artifact, a pyramidal crystal that pulsed with internal light. This fragment has established the strongest connection. It keeps transmitting a sequence of coordinates deep within Jupiter's atmosphere, along with what appears to be technical specifications. Specifications for what? Talura asked. A weapon, Nix replied. Or more accurately, a key that can activate something already there, something the ancestral gods left behind, dormant beneath Jupiter's clouds for billions of years. Talura's tactical mind immediately began calculating possibilities. Colonel Corvo, how quickly can you assemble a strike team? 3 hours. But penetrating Jupiter's atmosphere at those depths would require the Perseverance, Talura finished for him. It's our only vessel with deep atmospheric capabilities. Esden nodded grimly. It's also a scientific vessel, not a warship. Minimal defenses. Then we'll need a distraction, Talura decided. Something to draw the Morgrath's attention away from Jupiter long enough for the Perseverance to make its descent. Nix's projection flickered again, more violently this time, as another tremor shook the base. Admiral, there's something else you should know. The artifacts aren't just communicating with us, they're changing. The molecular structure of the stone and crystal is shifting, becoming more complex. It's as if they're evolving in response to our interaction. Talura looked at the tactical display showing the overwhelming Morgrath forces surrounding their home system. Throughout human history, their species had been outmatched, outgunned, faced with impossible odds, and yet they had endured. Send the coordinates to the Perseverance, she ordered, and prepare the fleet for immediate deployment. If these gods have been watching us all along, let's show them what humanity does in its darkest hour. As the officers dispersed to carry out her orders, Talura remained staring at the tactical display, at the overwhelming array of enemy forces prepared to extinguish humanity from the galaxy. You wanted to see our flame, she whispered to the absent Morgrath commanders. Then prepare to burn. The Perseverance plunged through Jupiter's turbulent upper atmosphere, its reinforced hull groaning under pressures it was never designed to withstand. In the pilot's seat, Captain Orion Vex guided the research vessel deeper into the gas giant's swirling depths, past layers of ammonia crystals and hydrogen seas. Structural integrity at 62%, reported navigator Iskra Moraine, her fingers dancing across emergency systems. Hull temperature approaching critical limits. Orion nodded grimly. The artifact's coordinates point another 300 kilometers deeper. Can we make it? Technically? No, Iskra replied with a tight smile. But technically, we shouldn't have survived the Morgrath ambush at Saturn either. Above them, beyond Jupiter's crushing atmospheric layers, the desperate gambit was unfolding. The remaining Terran fleet had launched a seemingly suicidal offensive against the Morgrath blockade around Europa. 28 vessels against thousands, a distraction bought with blood. Incoming transmission from the Adamant Will, announced Communications Officer Darius Kesh. The view screen flickered to life, showing Admiral Talura's face, the bridge around her bathed in red emergency lighting. Captain Vex, status report. Descending. Through the transitional layer now, Admiral. Estimated 11 minutes to target coordinates. Talura's image stuttered as energy weapons fire impacted her vessel's shields. The Morgrath have committed 80% of their forces to engage us at Europa. Their command ship appears to be redirecting toward Jupiter. They know something's happening. We'll reach the coordinates before they can intercept, Orion promised. See that you do. The Council fleet is still 10 hours out. We're buying time with our lives now. The transmission ended abruptly as another impact rocked the flagship. In the Perseverance's cargo hold, Dr. Zara Vask knelt beside the pyramidal artifact, which now pulsed with increasing intensity, its formerly solid crystal structure becoming semi-fluid, tendrils of luminescent energy reaching toward her neural implants. It's responding to our descent, she reported over the internal comm. The energy patterns are shifting, becoming more organized, more intentional. The ship shuddered violently as they passed through a turbulent hydrogen current. Warning. Klaxons blared as multiple systems failed simultaneously. Propulsion at 30%, Iskra called out. Diverting emergency power. We're being scanned, Darius reported urgently. Massive energy signature from below us. It's unlike anything in our databases. Through the forward viewport, something impossible appeared through Jupiter's swirling gases. A perfect sphere of absolute darkness, 50 kilometers in diameter, suspended in the crushing atmosphere where nothing artificial should have been. Able to survive. We've found it, Orion whispered. Whatever it is. In the cargo hold, the artifact suddenly liquefied completely, flowing like quicksilver across Dr. Vask's hands and up her arms, merging with her neural implants before she could react. She gasped, her eyes glowing with the same luminescence as the crystal. I see it now, she said, her voice overlaid with harmonics that made the air vibrate. The ancestral weapon, the key, the way. On the bridge, Orion watched in alarm as Zara's vital signs spiked across his monitor. Dr. Vask, what's happening? They chose humanity for a reason, she replied, her voice increasingly inhuman. The Morgrath are not the first to threaten the evolutionary patterns. The gods left sentinels in every promising system. Guardians, weapons that could only be awakened by species with the right combination of traits. What traits? Orion demanded as the ship descended toward the perfect darkness. Iron will, burning determination, righteous fury. Zara's voice resonated through the ship's systems. The ancestral gods did not create life forms that surrendered. They seeded worlds that would birth warriors. The massive dark sphere below them began to pulse, responding to some signal from Zara or the artifact now merged with her consciousness. Morgrath command ship entering Jupiter's upper atmosphere, Darius reported. They're pursuing us directly. Zara's transformed voice filled the bridge once more. Bring us into contact with the sphere. The weapon requires activation by blood, freely given, a sacrifice of the protected to awaken the protector. Orion hesitated only briefly before making the hardest command decision of his career. Navigator Moraine, set course directly for the sphere. Maximum velocity. As the Perseverance accelerated toward the ancient construct, Orion opened a channel to the fleet. Admiral Talura, We've found something. Something big. I don't know if we'll survive to see what happens next, but if we don't make it, it's been an honor." "The honor is ours, Captain," came Tellura's steady reply. "Whatever happens now, you've carried humanity's flame into the darkness. Make it burn." The Perseverance struck the perfect darkness at 5,000 kilometers per hour. Instead of destruction, the vessel passed through the surface like it was entering water, disappearing into the ancient construct that had waited 8 billion years for this precise moment. And throughout the Jupiter system, every Morgrath vessel simultaneously lost power, their advanced technology suddenly rendered inert by something primordial, awakening from its long slumber. The Galactic Council representatives arrived to find the impossible. Over 2,000 Morgrath world breakers drifted powerless in the space around Jupiter, their once fearsome weapons silent, their communication systems dead. The remaining vessels had fled in disarray, their retreat marked by panic rather than strategy. The Council observation vessel approached the Adamant Will, scarred, damaged, but triumphant. Admiral Tellura stood on her bridge, watching as the diplomatic shuttle docked, bringing High Counselor Davrex and the Tuathi Observer on board. "Explain," Davrex demanded immediately, his translucent skin pulsing with agitation. "Our sensors detect massive space-time distortions throughout this system. The Morgrath fleet is disabled. And Jupiter is changed. Indeed, the gas giant had transformed. Where once swirled red and amber clouds now shimmered bands of iridescent energy, pulsating with rhythms that matched human brainwave patterns. At the South Pole, a massive vortex had formed, not a storm, but a perfectly geometrical aperture that defied conventional physics. "We activated a defense system," Tellura replied simply. "One left by the ancestral gods for precisely this purpose." The Tuathi Observer floated forward, crystalline body resonating with the same frequencies now emanating from Jupiter. "The Sentinels of Evolution. We thought them myths. Myths that just saved humanity," came a voice from the doorway. Dr. Nix Isolde entered, supporting a weakened Dr. Zara Vask, whose eyes still flickered occasionally with otherworldly light. "The Perseverance?" Tellura asked immediately. "Gone," Zara replied softly. "Transformed. Captain Vex and his crew. They've become part of the Sentinel now. Their consciousness patterns have been preserved within the construct." Davrex's skin paled. "You sacrificed your own people to activate an ancestral weapon? This is exactly why developing species must be supervised. You've unleashed forces beyond your comprehension." "No," Zara countered, standing straighter despite her exhaustion. "We understood exactly what we were doing. The artifacts communicated. The choice clearly, the sacrifice was voluntary. Iron will freely given." From the viewport, they watched as one of the disabled Morgrath vessels suddenly began to disintegrate, not through violence but through perfect disassembly. Each component separated cleanly from the others, forming an expanding cloud of parts that began to reconfigure into something new. "The Sentinel isn't just a weapon," Nix explained. "It's a repository of ancestral technology, technology that responds to humanity's neural patterns. It recognizes us as worthy inheritors." Davrex turned to the Tuathi Observer in alarm. "This cannot be permitted. The Council has strict protocols regarding ancestral technology. These humans must surrender control immediately." The crystalline beings seemed to vibrate with something akin to amusement. "Control. No species controls the Sentinels, Counselor. They choose their partners, and they have chosen humanity." Through the viewport, more Morgrath vessels began the strange disassembly process, their advanced technology harvested and repurposed by invisible forces. From Jupiter's new vortex emerged structures, massive geometrically perfect platforms, that began positioning themselves throughout the system. "What you're witnessing," Tellura said quietly, is the rebirth of Sol system under protection of the Sentinel. The ancestral gods may have vanished from this universe, but they left guardians behind. Guardians that needed the right kind of species to awaken them. "And what happens now?" Davrex demanded, his diplomatic composure crumbling. "You possess a power that could threaten the entire council." Talura smiled, not unkindly, but with the weight of one who had stared extinction in the face and emerged transformed. "What happens now, Counselor, is that humanity takes its place among the stars. Not as supplicants begging for protection, but as equals who have proven their worth." She gestured to the tactical display, where data streamed in from across the system. The Morgrath retreat had become a rout, their once invincible armada scattering before the awakened Sentinel's power. "For too long, you dismissed us as primitive because we retained our individuality, our passion, our willingness to fight against impossible odds. You saw our emotional nature as weakness, our diversity as inefficiency. But the ancestral gods saw differently. They seeded worlds looking for species that would never surrender their flame, even in the darkest night. From Jupiter's transformed atmosphere, new vessels were emerging, sleek constructs that incorporated both ancestral and human design elements, born from the merged consciousness of the Perseverance's crew and the ancient technology they had. Awakened, the Morgrath believed they could extinguish humanity, Talura continued. "You believed we would kneel before the Council and surrender our sovereignty for protection. Both of you underestimated what humans become when backed into a corner." The Tuathi observer drifted closer to the viewport, crystalline form resonating, with the energies now flowing through the system. The cycle continues. The worthy rise. As if in response, a message appeared across every screen and neural interface in the system. Words forming not in any single language, but in concepts that translated themselves perfectly to each mind that received them. "The flame is past. The sentinels awaken. The next guardians rise." Zara looked up, her eyes clearing as the last of the artifact's influence faded from her system. "They're gone now, the consciousness fragments from the artifacts. They've rejoined the Sentinel, but they left us with understanding, knowledge." "Knowledge of what?" Davrex asked, his voice barely audible. "Of why the ancestral gods vanished," she replied. "They didn't die or transcend. They became the species they seeded. They fragmented their consciousness across 1,000 worlds, hiding their power in artifacts, waiting for worthy inheritors. And now humanity inherits," Talura concluded. "Not to conquer, not to rule, but to preserve the flame the ancestrals kindled billions of years ago, to ensure life continues to evolve, to adapt, to rise." Outside, Jupiter pulsed once more, sending waves of energy throughout the system that carried not destruction, but transformation. The remaining 12 artifacts on Earth simultaneously activated, connecting the homeworld to its transformed gas giant, creating a network of protection that would endure for eons. Davrex stared in silence at the spectacle before him, witnessing the birth of something ancient and new simultaneously. The moment when humanity ceased being merely another species and became something the galaxy would remember for millennia to come. "They laughed at us," Talura said softly, watching as the first of the new Sentinel-human hybrid vessels approached the adamant will. "They mocked our struggles, our passion, our fury. But we didn't just survive. We awakened gods." She turned to face the council representatives, her expression both fierce and compassionate, the iron will, burning flame, and righteous fury that had drawn the ancestral gods to humanity in the first place. "And now those gods speak with our voice.